November 21, 1944. Under darkness in the Formosa Strait, Japan's fast battleship Kongo limps toward home. Torpedoes flood her port side, power is fading, and over 1,200 lives are at risk. Hours later, a sudden explosion in the forward magazine seals her fate, and yet to this day, not a single wreck survey has publicly confirmed where she truly rests. How could a ship this famous vanish in seas this shallow? And what clues buried in wartime records hold the key to solving her final mystery? Kongo's story begins not in Japan, but on the banks of England's Barrow-in-Furness, where she was laid down at the Vickers shipyard in 1911. Commissioned into the Imperial Japanese Navy in 1913, she entered service as a battlecruiser, sleek, long, and fast for her era. Over 2 decades later, the demands of a changing naval battlefield forced transformation. In the 1930s, engineers stripped her down and rebuilt her as a fast battleship, reinforcing her armor, expanding her hull with anti-torpedo bulges, and boosting her top speed to nearly 30 knots. By the time the Pacific War erupted, Kongo stretched roughly 222 meters from bow to stern. Her main battery, 8 14-inch guns, housed in 4 twin turrets, gave her a silhouette recognized by any naval observer. 2 turrets sat forward and 2 aft, all in a line that only the Kongo class carried. Later upgrades crowded her decks with anti-aircraft guns, sponsons, and platforms, a dense cluster of fittings that would stand out even on sonar. Distinctive features marked her for both friend and foe. The towering pagoda-style superstructure, a lattice of platforms and rangefinders, rose above the deck, though in a sinking this could collapse, leaving only the base as a clue. At the stern, catapults and an aircraft handling area signaled her late war role as a fleet scout. Underwater, searchers look for these signatures: the long hull with bulges, the spacing of 4 main turrets, the remnants of her superstructure, and the stern aviation fittings. If a wreck is found, these are the markers that could settle her identity beyond doubt. Speed gave Kongo a role no other Japanese battleship could claim. At the outbreak of war in the Pacific, she joined the vanguard, covering invasion forces as Japan swept across Southeast Asia. Her engines could drive her alongside aircraft carriers, a rare feat for a battleship of her generation. That speed was more than a technical marvel, it was a tactical asset, allowing her to strike, withdraw, and redeploy faster than most of her peers. In 1942, Kongo's guns thundered in the night battles off Guadalcanal. She supported bombardments that threatened Allied footholds and dueled with American destroyers and cruisers in the confined waters of the Solomon Islands. Survivors remembered the ship's ability to maneuver quickly, closing or escaping as the tide of battle shifted. She was not just a blunt instrument, she was a fleet's fast-moving shield and spear. Her reputation only grew as the war intensified. In October 1944, Kongo sailed into the largest naval battle in history, the Battle of Leyte Gulf. There, she ran with the main force, escorting carriers and exchanging fire with American ships off Samar. Her presence in these operations underscored her strategic value, a capital ship that could keep pace with modern naval warfare, adapting to the shifting demands of a conflict fought across thousands of miles of ocean. By late 1944, Kongo was one of the last of her kind, still operational after years of relentless action. Her final voyage began not with retreat, but with the same urgency and speed that had defined her career, heading north through dangerous waters toward her fate in the Formosa Strait. Shortly before 3 in the morning on November 21, 1944, the Formosa Strait was a black expanse swept by wind and rain. A Japanese battleship column, led by Yamato and Nagato, pressed north at 16 knots. Deep below the surface, the United States submarine Sealion, commanded by Eli Reich, tracked the formation on radar. Reich's crew maneuvered for a shot, closing to torpedo range in the darkness. At 3:01, Sealion fired a spread of torpedoes. Moments later, Kongo shuddered as 2 torpedoes struck her port side, one near the bow and another amidships. The escorting destroyer Urakaze was also hit and vanished in a flash of fire. Aboard Kongo, alarms rang out. water surged through ruptured bulkheads. The ship's list grew as the crew struggled to contain the flooding. Lieutenant Commander Yutaka Takahata, overseeing the secondary batteries, recalled the mounting confusion. Despite the damage, Kongo's captain ordered engines ahead. For nearly 2 hours, the battered ship limped through heavy seas, steering toward Keelung in hopes of reaching safety. Escorts Hamikaze and Isokaze stayed close, their crews bracing for more attacks. By 5:18, Kongo's power failed. The order to abandon ship was given. Men scrambled to don life jackets and reach the rails. Then, as evacuation began, a massive explosion tore through the forward section, likely the forward magazine. The battleship rolled and sank quickly, taking with her over 1,200 souls. Survivors in the water watched as the last of Kongo disappeared beneath the waves, leaving only debris and oil on the surface. The exact spot where she vanished remains uncertain, shaped by the chaos of battle and the confusion of night. Pinpointing Kongo's final resting place is far from straightforward. Wartime navigation relied on dead reckoning and visual bearings, not satellite fixes. In the chaos after the torpedo hits, course changes and shifting speeds left the ship's true path uncertain, and any reported position could be off by several nautical miles. Even after the main force detached, Kongo continued under her own power for nearly 2 hours, drifting and maneuvering through the strait. Strong northeast monsoon currents in the Formosa Strait, running up to 4 knots, could have carried the damaged hull several miles from the plotted track. Nighttime winds and heavy seas added another layer of unpredictability, scattering debris and survivors across a wide swath of ocean. The seafloor here offers little help. While the depth is only about 110 meters, the bottom is a patchwork of soft sediment and shifting sand. Over decades, strong currents and seasonal storms can bury large objects, leaving only faint outlines detectable by sonar. Trawling scars, long parallel grooves from commercial fishing gear, crisscross the area and sometimes mimic the shadows of a shipwreck on sonar scans. Old nets and lost lines snag on any projection, masking true wreckage or dragging smaller debris far from the main site. The nature of Kongo's sinking adds another layer of complexity. Torpedo hits breached her port side, and the forward magazine explosion likely tore the bow apart, scattering heavy sections across the bottom. Instead of a single intact hull, searchers might face a debris field with major pieces separated by hundreds of meters, some partially buried, others exposed. Each of these factors, navigational drift, environmental masking, and structural breakup, means that finding Kongo requires more than a single set of coordinates. It demands a methodical, multi-sensor approach and a willingness to search where records and memory leave only questions. Search teams would begin by dividing the Formosa Strait into 3 priority zones. 3 zones laid out to reflect the best available evidence and the greatest uncertainties. The first zone is centered on the commonly cited estimate near 26 degrees 9 minutes north, 121 degrees 23 minutes east. This area matches the positions most often referenced in post-war reports, and it remains the logical starting point for any search. The second zone follows the likely route Kongo took toward Keelung after detaching from the main force, forming a corridor that accounts for her movement during those final hours. This corridor reflects the ship still being underway for a time after she was struck. The third zone widens further down current, where strong northeast monsoon flows and the force of the final explosion could have scattered wreckage beyond the initial track. Scatter zones are important because debris fields do not always stay near the point of damage. Systematic surveys would begin with high-resolution multi-beam sonar, mapping the seafloor for hull-sized shadows or unusual relief. Sonar mapping builds a broad picture of bottom shape and potential targets without touching the site. Promising targets would then be scanned with side-scan sonar for sharper outlines, looking specifically for the length and turret spacing unique to a Kongo-class hull. Targets that show linear hull signatures and spaced turret shadows rise to the top of the list. Magnetometers would sweep to detect the broad ferrous signature of a battleship's steel mass, helping to distinguish wreck material from natural rock outcrops or discarded metal. Magnetometers add a different, non-visual layer of confirmation. Only after these remote methods would remotely operated vehicles descend to document features for proof, always under a strict no-salvage protocol to protect the site and to respect the men lost. Proof must be photographic, sonar confirmed, and treated as a war grave. The typical sequence is multi-beam first, side scan second, magnetometer third, and then targeted remotely operated vehicle inspection to minimize disturbance. This approach gives the best chance to identify a Kongo-class signature without unnecessary disruption. Confirmation, if it ever comes, will rest on a handful of features that no other wreck in the Formosa Strait can match. 4 massive barbettes in the signature Kongo-class arrangement, 2 forward and 2 aft, would anchor the identification. The hull length, stretching close to 222 meters, would stand out in sonar returns even if broken by explosion or buried in sediment. Remnants of the pagoda-style superstructure base, heavy anti-aircraft gun tubs, and the distinct bulges along the hull would further narrow the field. At the stern, the outlines of aircraft catapult fittings and handling gear would confirm the late war configuration. A debris field showing portside damage and a bow section torn away by an internal blast would match the historical record and would help reconstruct the loss sequence. Reported positions and measurements are estimates, and the commonly cited estimate places the sinking near 26 degrees 9 minutes north, 121 degrees 23 minutes east, in water reported as approximately 350 feet, approximately 110 meters, and roughly 55 nautical miles northwest of Keelung, Taiwan. These are commonly cited estimates and are not publicly confirmed. Even with these clues, any discovery must be treated as a war grave. No salvage, no disturbance, only respectful documentation to honor those still aboard. Today, the wreck of Kongo remains unconfirmed, her true resting place hidden beneath one of Asia's busiest straits. For over 1,200 families, that silence is unfinished grief. Until the seabed yields proof, memory and mystery share the deep. Some chapters of war remain unwritten even in the age of sonar.